Hey everybody, my name's Pluto. Today we're going to be doing another commentated video. Today we're doing the biggest of lads. We are doing Divine Sentence red coins from SezNative Reminiscence, the hardest star in the entire hack, and I can say that with 100% confidence because at the time of recording this, I've actually beaten this hack. Yes, I've beaten it 100%, including C12 100s, which will be the next video uploaded on this channel. I don't know when, but hopefully soon. This is, I guess, like the first part of this two-part finale of beating the hack. Divine Sentence Reds is the hardest star in the game, in my opinion harder than Ramby's Reverie Reds from Treasurable Dream Edition, which if you don't know is very, very hard. It just kind of is this massive undertaking which surprisingly did not take very long at all, but I feel like just talking about the star is wasting a bit of time that could be spent talking about the jumps. So let's talk about the jumps of the star. So this star is pretty linear. It's divided into 6 different star paths, although it's really only 5 different star paths because the way it is. At the beginning of the level, we're forced to go down this star path, which is the star 2 path. It's actually kind of nice that we get to do it at the beginning because it has some pretty inconsistent jumps, such as these arches where you need to watch out for the corner physics that can happen. If you don't know, corner physics is when you rub in the corner and are unable to wall kick. It's pretty common, and you might hate them without knowing what they are, so there you go. Jump on these slopes. These slopes are so close to this wall that you actually have less room than it looks because they're very steep and they're like right up against the wall, so you only really have this bottom half to work with. Thankfully, that's enough to easily get a jump because these slopes are not slippery. There's a couple different key textures in this level. Some of them are slippery, some of them aren't. There's a lot of slope jumps. As you can see, this level's a bit swift. While it is very difficult, it's a bit faster paced than a level like Ramby's Reverie, for example. When I did Star 2, I did a QSOG cheese for this section, but I opt to do intended, which is wall kicks, because I found it to be more consistent, as the QSOG to skip this section is very precise. This red coin's a bit precise to grab, but thankfully, if you just pause and double jump on the same frame, it actually lines you up perfectly to just get the red coin, so you can get that triple jump very easily. And we're actually already leaving the Star 2 section. One nice thing about reds here is that there's actually no reds at the very end of star paths, which means that we can skip some of the more inconsistent jumps that are placed at the end of the stars. For example, most notably, we don't have to do the final jump of star 6, we don't have to do the kind of weird jumps at the end of star 4, and we don't have to do the mandatory firsty shit at the end of star 2. The only real exception to this is star 3, which we kind of almost need to do in full, but you'll see why that's a bit weird in a second. And by in a second, I mean in quite a while, because now, leaving the Star 2 area, these slopes nicely transition us directly into the main path. You might be familiar with this, because if you're not doing Star 2, you do this path for every other star. Unfortunately, it's not the direct spawn anymore, it's a little bit after spawn, which means you actually need to develop some real consistency at these jumps. Thankfully, these aren't the hardest jumps in the world. They can be done pretty consistently. The main trick to these is what some deviants, some degenerates have nicknamed the Amogus jump, because it kind of looks like an Among Us crewmate, just one that's very tall. You can see it from the distance, it kind of looks like the letter A. This is a double arch. A double arch is just an arch into another arch. This one is particularly tight because you need to transition to this arch, which takes us to this elaborate wall kick sequence. I say elaborate, but it's actually quite simple. We do need to make this pit stop for this red coin. Normally you would just hit the front of the first pillar there and just go into this wall, but there you need to do a little bit of a dance to get that red coin. Not a big deal, doesn't take very long. You can actually see these pillars are marked where you're supposed to wall kick, which is pretty nice, makes it a bit easier to tell what to do. And we get transitioned right over here, where there's a scuttlebug, which can kill you if you're really unlucky. So here we have another jump which has an alternative strat. I'll throw in some footage of the alternative strat on the screen because it's a little interesting. For this red coin, I opt to do something that I think is supposed to be intended, which is going back into this wall kick sequence and doing a couple wall kicks, but you'll see players like Remu, and I think Focus's Theory Test as well, will opt to just simply grab it for back of the wall kick. It was slightly buffed in this version of the game because in older versions there's no quicksand slope there, so you can just be directly attached to it, but it is still possible to grab it with a precise 44.9. So that is an alternative strategy if you do not like the one that we do here. And then we have this section. Here we have these wall kicks off these walls. It's worth noting that the blue patches are lava, which is dangerous because if you touch it, you will be burned and you won't be able to wall kick anymore. So it's important that you avoid that. Thankfully, it's not too difficult to avoid. You just have to be a little careful. Generally, holding up there allows you to get that arch every time, but it's good to pause buffer it and do it in such a way that if you do hit the ceiling, that you won't be immediately dead. Here we have a strategy that I showcased on my second channel. Normally you have to do this precise jump through this death plane, but we can actually avoid that by ledge grabbing here, and then we need to get a certain angle. I line up with this pillar, but there's other visual cues you can use. Then we can just simply do a chain long jump, and this will initiate this wall kick sequence. While this wall kick sequence may seem a little daunting, it's actually perfectly loopable. You start by doing 8 wall kicks here, and then you can enter this perfect loop of doing 5 wall kicks between these pillars, and then 7 wall kicks between these pillars, and this will actually allow you to climb up this thing as much as you like. We simply need to climb up this thing until we can land on top of these slopes, and this skips a couple jumps in the stage. That's pretty nice. It's worth noting that if you're familiar with the stage, you might know that there's the start 3 path, and you might be wondering why we're not going on that. There's a reason why we're not going on the start 3 path, and it'll be apparent once we've done the start 4 path, and if you are aware of my second channel, you might be familiar with what we're going to do, but I'll keep it as a surprise for now. Go right here, land on the switch. So this blue switch is going to spawn a blue block. It's going to be a slope blue block, which allows us to complete a jump back on the mainland. First we need to detour for this red coin. This red coin's pretty easy to grab. The main potential difficulty is that jump dive right there, but it's actually very lenient. Now we need to do these pseudo Sombra slopes. We're not going to do them like actual Sombra slopes. Instead we're just going to ride along them naturally. If you don't know, a Sombra slope is when you ground pound on the slope perpendicularly and just slide down it perpendicularly. I believe that's what's intended there, but it's not necessary, so we don't need to do it. These jumps are kind of tricky. Those purple slopes were seen at the beginning of the Star 2 section, but they're actually slippery slopes. These purple ones aren't quite slippery, but they are pretty hard to maneuver on, especially on these cube things, because it's pretty awkward. The main thing you need to avoid is backwards jumps. Backwards jumps just happen when you have too much backwards momentum on the slope and Mario jumps backwards. Those can be pretty dangerous if you don't know they're coming. This section is very reminiscent of Treasure World C2 with this little pillar, with this like little pillar here in this tower. There's a red coin right there, which I get with a triple jump wall kick here. It's just my favorite way to get there, because the collision on the border between these two triangles is a little janky. You can clip through it, which usually will make you live, but it's just not something I want to mess with. And thankfully, we can skip a small QSOD section with that slope jump. It's a little risky, but the QSODs themselves are a little tricky, so I feel like it's worth it just to be a little faster and make the completion a little cleaner. Obviously, I'm not the cleanest player in the world. You know, I pause buffer a lot, but I get the job done, and I don't think it's hideous to look at, so I think that's what matters more. So, climb up at these slopes again. I guess while we're doing some pretty mundane jumps, I can talk more about the stage. Worth noting that this is, as I think, a reference to Dream Edition Bowser 2, but this stage, I actually really enjoyed the stage. It honestly surprised me how much I enjoyed the stage, because when I first saw it I thought, oh, this is going to be kind of dumb, it's going to feel like a T-Don, but it actually didn't feel that way at all. While there were some inconsistent jumps, notably at the end of Stars, every jump in this stage for the most part was pretty consistent. Star 2 had some pretty jank ones, and there's some jank stuff in the Star 4 path as well, but overall, the stage was very, very consistent, which was very relieving, because I was worried that it would be one of those stages that was just super grindy, but thankfully, with enough practice, I got good at pretty much every jump here, and was confident in most of them. The main ones I weren't confident in were the Star 5 path, mostly because those jumps are very awkward, but they're still very doable. It's more so a stage that preferences being kind of complex and a little awkward over just raw precision, compared to something like, I don't know, like C15 in this game, because C15 has a lot less like interesting jumps in my opinion. It has some cool things, but it's mostly just a stage that just has a lot of precise things, or just things that are just tight. But this stage has like things that are like actually, you know, a challenge beyond just like being precise. It's just like there's a level of precision. Obviously, you saw the precise wall kicks at the beginning, but you know, there's more to it than that. As you can see, barely making that jump. The jump's actually pretty difficult because it's a momentum jump, and depending on your position, depends on whether or not you'll make it. So now we're at where red spawns, which is actually where Star 4 and Star 5 branch out, but we actually need to jump off here real quick because there's this red coin. Now that that's done, we can come up here. We gotta redo this jump. It's important that you get consistent at this momentum jump because you actually need to do it 3 times in reds. So make sure that you're good at it. It is pretty tricky, but I very rarely die to this. Not just in reds. I think I never died to it in reds, and then I died to it like a couple times going for star 4, but that's about it. Thankfully, this is retryable. If you hold neutral, Mario will like stop on a dime pretty much, so you can use that to prevent him from just sliding off with the little bit of momentum he does have. Right there, perfect slide. That was very good. I'm actually pleasantly surprised of how fun this game ended up being. I'll probably talk about that on the recline more, because we actually do have some jumps that are worth talking about, because we're going to be going to the star 4 section. You actually have a routing option. You can choose to do either stars 5 and 6 or 4 and 3 next. I choose to do 4 and 3 first, but there are reasons to do star 5 and 6 before them. It's just personally I find that this path is a little harder, although I actually died a lot more on the star 5 and 6 path. I don't think I ever actually died to the star 4 path. Actually no, I think I died to it once. Yeah, I believe I died to this path once. Meanwhile, I died to the star 5 path 3 times. And 2 of those were the 13 out of 15 chokes that you can see on the screen, the PB. Unfortunately died to those. I also talked over those momentum lava bounces. They're a little tricky because maintaining your speed properly is actually really awkward. Generally what worked was pause buffering holding left and then slowly turning to an up left. And that usually turned the camera with enough speed. Worth noting that that was just a dive into the lava bounce. You actually can't see upside into those. These wall kicks are a little tricky. They're quite precise, but more so they're just awkward. I did learn a pretty consistent way of doing them, and that was actually just not touching the camera at all. The main thing that was killing me was messing with the camera to see where I was, but I realized just straining upwards gave you good wall kicks for pretty much everything here. So you could opt to do that strategy and avoid the whole fuss of having to mess around with your camera and stuff and potentially lose your position. This dive is a little tricky because you need to roll out there. It's worth noting that you can take fall damage there, but even in the fall damage, you can still roll out, so it's not a problem. This wall kick's a little tricky. I personally do a long jump here because there's actually no corner physics in the corner that's made by that little strip and the wall, so you can opt to just go a little low and hold up with the corner physics and be fine. This red coin is actually harder than it looks. It's actually pretty difficult to grab because it's very easy to grab it too low and not have enough height to make this wall kick back. Thankfully, I used a pseudo setup. It was just a general visual cue, and it worked pretty well. Going across these walls here. So here we have the return of the lava. There's a heap hole in this lava. I don't know how he's not burning. I mean, presumably he's made out of something that is somehow resistant to lava, which I don't know what that would be because I can't think of a metal that's resistant to lava. But if you know a metal that's resistant to lava, tell me about it. You know, that'd be kind of cool. It will boost engagement. Unfortunately, it will boost engagement by telling me about something that is unrelated to the video. But I guess by talking about it, I've made it related to the video. Turning around there is a simple wall kick maneuver, and now I'm going to do a cheese. Instead of going down the star 4 path and jumping back or whatever, I'm actually going to D-pad left a bit here. You can see my maneuver with the webcam, and lining up with a certain part of the slope. This allows me to slide off and just hold up, and this position conveniently happens to be here in the level, which you might not recognize this, but this is the end of star 3. What this allows me to skip is it allows me having to skip the one death floor jump I talked about skipping with that wall kick sequence. It also allows me to skip having to do the beginning of star 3, which has some pretty tricky jumps. So in short, this skip allows me to do the hardest path in my opinion earlier. It allows me to skip some jumps in star 3, including just some very awkward jumps that I'm pretty inconsistent at, and it looks cool. So this excuse me. This trick right here is like a triple win. It is a win on all 3 fronts. It looks cool, skips annoying jumps, and it lets me do the hard jumps earlier. It's a really awesome skip, and I'm really happy I found it because it made grinding this quite a bit more fun because it was just cool, and I think it just made the routing a lot better. It's actually a pretty easy skip too. If you do it safely, you can just go for the wall kicks. You can even go for a ledge grab, but the reason why that's not super viable is the Goomba. This triple jump looks scary, but it's actually not that bad. Even if you do get your jump eaten somehow, which never happened to me, you can just slide off onto the platform. It's important that you strain a lot there because you want to avoid the ledge grab. It's pretty easy ledge grab, but I have a visual cue to avoid it. Basically holding down right until you reach the wall, and then you hold down up right, but more up. That generally works. That dive's a little precise, and here we're going to do another mini skip. You might have seen that small little platform, and that was actually meant for you to jump onto and then do a very, very, very precise chain long jump down to the main stage. However, I found a skip for that. Instead of going all the way there, you can instead wall kick along this tower here, get to this position, and this actually lines up very nicely with the platform. So you can skip another very difficult jump by just diving over. Now we're up to 12 out of 15 reds, but you might notice at the position that we're at, we're pretty low in the stage, and the star 5 and 6 paths are pretty high, so there's not going to be much to talk about because we're just doing reclimbs, and this is a stage where HP doesn't really matter that much, so might as well talk about the game and the stage. I like this game a lot more than I thought it did, or I thought I would. The main reason for that is just because I feel like this game got a lot better after Overworld 1. Overworld 1 had some okay moments, especially Course 6 and Bowser 1 in my opinion, but it was definitely weaker compared to the rest of the game. Overworld 2 had a lot of frustrating moments because a lot of those red coin stars were pretty meh, but I think once this game got to Overworld 3 it got a lot better. The obvious exclusion to this is Course 12, and I don't want to talk about Course 12 because there is the video on Course 1200 coming up which will delve into the stage and also some other elements of Kaizo, etc. that I want to talk about that the stage gives me an excuse to talk about because frankly it's too boring to warrant a 50-minute commentary about crossovers and arches. That's simply not the kind of video I want to make, so while it will be commentated, it will be a different style of commentary probably. But yeah, besides that one stage, Overworld 3 was very solid. I got to see a lot of interesting ideas, interesting concepts, and some of the strongest red coin stars in the style I've ever seen. Usually spread out reds tend to be a little weak, especially in stages that have all 7 stars, but I feel like this hack executed it pretty well. It was a lot more tasteful than IOF, which usually just made you do every single star path and more again. While you do still need to do every star path, it usually spared you from endings, which was nice because it meant that you could just... It basically meant that the stars felt more distinct. I feel like each star had its own identity even with reds, and I feel like that made this game a lot more memorable. Obviously, the claim of if this game is memorable is a claim that needs to stand the test of time because it's memorable because I beat it yesterday at the time of recording. But in general, I feel like this game... also, did I say yes? Was it yesterday? Actually, let me check real quick. Was it yesterday or was it 2 days ago? I have such a... Okay, yeah, it was yesterday, sorry. So yeah, a game I beat yesterday, it's like... it's hard to say, like, yeah, it's really memorable, guys, because, like, yeah, I just beat it. But I think in general, it's like, as soon as I beat IOF, I kind of already forgot a lot of the normal stars in that game. I mostly just remembered my experience of reds. In this game, I feel like a lot of the normal stars were just better. I think this game is a very clear improvement over IOF, and in my opinion, it's very overhated. And the reason it's overhated is pretty simple in my opinion. This style of ROM hack is kind of overdone. The style of you do 6 stars, 5 or 6 stars, and then you do reds, and that's reds is kind of like everything all at once. That style is hated at this point because it's been done by every Japanese hack basically, and it's very common. And I totally get people who don't like it. I totally respect people, but I will say that calling this hack worse than IOF feels a bit disingenuous in my opinion. Maybe some people actually do feel that way, but I feel more so it's just about, like, I don't know. I struggle to find reasons for me to like IOF over this game. I like this game quite a bit, and I'm happy that even though this game doesn't get a lot of attention, I think, I'm really happy that I got to beat this game, mostly just because I feel like I did it justice. Yeah, I'm very happy with this, but I'll talk about that more later, either in this video or the next video. There we have that jump, which has those one-way walls that teleport you across the ground. Just need to use a visual cue for where to double jump so you can get that triple jump. If you're cool here, you can do forward side flips up these steps, but I opted not to. So here I do this triple jump wall kick here. I don't think this is the safest way to do this, but it was the way I was most comfortable with because I really didn't want to get up with the Hifo. Same thing with this. I feel like I should probably wait for the Snuffit, but he never ever killed me, so I never bothered. Even when he was closer to me, he never killed me because I couldn't get out the way fast enough. Now this wall kick section is actually really awkward. These walls are pretty precise to hit. It's very easy to hit the very bottom of them, which you don't know is the dreaded death pixel, and if you hit the margin in between two different angled walls, you will die because you will hit a different type of death pixel. And also, if you notice, the camera is pretty bad. You can see me constantly moving the camera back and forth. It's very tricky to manage the camera like this. You also need to, while this is happening, remember which walls to hit, which is a pretty simple pattern. It's a right, right, left, then alternating right, left, right, left, right. And that's how you do it. It's important that you do a big jump over that slope because it's possible to ledge grab that slope, and then if you do that, you're very dead. So make sure that your last wall kick is a good one. Then we're going to lava bounce here. I do the strat here, which is a lot safer than what Remu did for Star 5 here. He did a strat which pretty much skips like the entire thing, but I personally struggled to do it with even any sort of consistency, so I have to do the much safer strat, which is baiting this curl mame. Baiting him is a combination of using jumps with no kicks and jumps with kicks, so that way you can time him out. I didn't really have a proper setup, but I did have generally just like a series of inputs that I just kind of knew would work, so I just kind of did that. So I guess it is a setup, but it wasn't like a proper setup because I never really made it. I never really labbed it out. I just kind of did it, and it was just something that worked, so I just kept doing it. This arch killed me once. This arch might look like a simple arch, but it's actually pretty easy to get in your own head. Keep in mind at this point you're going to have a little bit of nerves because it's scary, and Star 5 in general has a lot of very scary jumps, so you're kind of going to be on edge here. If you arch too high here, you're going to hit the ceiling and bonk. That's only if you're if the lower wall kick goes too high though. Once you wall kick for the arch, you actually can't bonk because you're facing you're going up with the ceiling, so you're going to be fine there. Okay, this jump is another one of those jumps that's kind of awkward in Star 5. We have to get a really low wall kick there. The way that I do it is with another pseudo setup, another pause at the same time of a double jump. This time I actually purposely go for a late frame wall kick so that way Mario can fall a little bit lower, which sounds like a pretty significant difference, or insignificant difference, but actually matters a lot on that jump. Thankfully, if you jump too high, you can just go back to the hole you came from, but it's a little scary. Alright, so this triple jump is a little intimidating as well because it's another very awkward jump in the star. We need to jump through this little wall here. However, it's a wall made of quicksand, which makes it quite scary. If you don't know how this mechanic works, when a wall is placed behind a ceiling, the game hates you. So it'll try to push Mario through the slope because there's a wall there, so the wall's going to try to push Mario out if he's at the top of it. This actually uses this mechanic to your benefit. You can use the wall to push you through the quicksand, and then if you have the right speed, you can go for a wall kick, but it's very awkward. I mentioned earlier that the Star 5 path is filled with awkward jumps, and these are the kind of jumps I'm talking about. That's why this path actually ends up being the one I died to the most, because it's the hardest one to do under the pressure of being on a good attempt, because it's so many awkward, unnatural jumps, but I kind of like it. I feel like it's creative, and it's one of the more memorable sections, because it just has so many cool jumps, in my opinion. Jumps that are very uncomfortable, but jumps that, stick out and, leave an impression beyond just like, this is a precise wall kick section. So, I think it's cool. Now you get to watch me do this tussle with the Snuffit for an hour. I struggled with the Snuffit because I kept getting kind of meh slope jumps. I was generally okay. Generally the way that you avoid the Snuffit is that you go downwards, but he was just giving me a lot of issues. Normally I try to kill him, but I was kind of scared to do that because whenever I kill him, there's usually like an instance where it's like, oh yeah, I can kill him right there. That's like the exact moment where I can kill this guy. But in this instance, there wasn't really a moment where I could really get up to him and punch him, or kick him rather. Instead, I opted to do the strat that I normally, or not normally do, but the strat that I do whenever there's no good chance to kill him, and that is just like keep going up until you're out of his range, which is a little uncomfortable. Because of that, this took quite a while, and this guy kind of zoned me, as you can see in the chat. Thankfully, at this point on the slope, you're kind of out of his range, so we can just go up here. And that's the end of the Star 5 section, basically. That means that there's only one more star path, and if you know, and we've gone through Star 1, which wasn't really a star, we've gone through Star 2, we've gone through Star 3, we've gone through Star 4, we've gone through 5, that leaves only 6. So, from this point, it's a little awkward to get back down, but if you get a slight angle here, I line it up with the walls back there, you can actually jump straight down to the bottom. So this Goomba can kind of fuck you up. Here I got the worst Goomba RNG. He happened to be directly in the middle of the platform, so I had to opt to go to there. The reason why that's the worst RNG is because you kind of slide a lot when you fall on the ledge there because of the heavy fall damage. So generally you want to avoid that, and the way that you avoid that is hitting the middle. But if the Goomba's in the middle, I didn't really want to risk bouncing off him, so I opted to just ledge grab the side. It ended up working out, but just know that that is the worst Goomba RNG, and I never got that in practice. Those precise wall kicks might have looked a little tricky, but they're actually pretty menial. They're not that difficult. And then we have the section which is kind of reminiscent of Toasted Coast with the one-way floors. Or just like the very thin floors, if you know what I mean. At least the Toasted Coast section in TD. And speaking of TD, it wouldn't be a very difficult level in a JP ROM hack if it didn't have some form of thins variant. This time we have hexagonal thins. So these thins are not the hardest thing in the world, but they are pretty tricky. This first jump is actually pretty hard because there's a higher floor on this one. So you have to make sure that your crossover is pretty precise. Then you gotta watch out for these. These two are offset. As you can see, I spam pause a lot. That's just to time the wall kicks better. I have done this several times without pausing. I do know the rhythm, but I didn't want to risk it in an attempt. And then the triangle fins. There is a setup for that. For the first wall kick, after the first wall kick, you hold this basically down and a little right. Then on the second wall kick, I unpause and D-pad up, and then pause again, and then hold up. And then you just have to turn the camera and get the ledge grab. That jump there might have seemed a little menial, but there's actually an invisible wall you can hit jumping to that hexagon platform, so you have to watch out for it. I'll throw some footage on screen of me hitting the invisible wall so you can see what it is. It's actually a very large invisible wall, so using that setup is actually a very good way to avoid having to deal with it. This amp is stationary. He's not homing, he's not circular, he's just stationary. The only condition where he'll kill you is if you try to go on this higher platform a little too low and miss the jump, then he's going to stun lock you. And now we have the final jump of the stage. Let's go. Here we have the legendary holes. Not that legendary, but they're pretty intimidating. So, taking a cue straight out that one novel I read in middle school, there's these bunch of these evenly shaped holes, although these ones are squares on circles. So obviously the main risk here is getting a false ledge grab, but you also need to watch out for not making it far enough in these things. Thankfully there's a visual cue that I used, which gave me a pretty good angle, and that made it possible to just go across these. Besides that, it's not too complex. I will be doing a cheese where I do a firsty dive at the end of this, that way I can do QSLGs to skip the harder hole section, because this red coin, grabbing this red coin is actually easier than going further in the star path because the holes get further apart. And I didn't want to risk dying, so I opted to do the QSLG strat, which requires, I think, a firsty dive. At least I think it requires a firsty dive. I never went for it without a firsty because I figured that if it was a real attempt, I'd be going for the firsty because it would be safer. So now we're going back, and I might as well just talk about the grind. This grind was actually really fun. It unfortunately didn't last very long, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. This start took less than 10 hours, 8 to 9 hours if we include practice and attempts, which is incredibly fast for a star this difficult. For some reason, I just developed a lot of consistency. I practiced, and I ended up being very consistent on all the jumps, which makes me wonder if the star is easier than I think, but when I think about all the hard jumps and other stars I've done, this star really sticks out as something that is just like truly difficult. And I remember when this game first came out and we were all looking at this level like, yeah, this level's ridiculous, and I didn't think that it would happen so soon, or the fact that multiple people would already have it. When I got this, I was, I believe, the first. I believe, because I don't know if Remu got it and just didn't upload, but I believe I was the first when I got this. But by the time I'm commentating this video right now, it's worth noting that Remu has also collected the star. So yeah, 2 people already have such an insanely hard star, and we've also both beaten the entire hack, so I just think that's awesome. I think it's awesome that this hack got the attention it deserved, like I said, and I'm really happy I could show it to you guys. Unfortunately, the next video of this hack will not show this hack in such a nice light, but I hope that this video gives you a nice basis to enjoy. Just show what this hack's about and show you how cool it can be. That's about all I have to say, though. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello. Jump from here, right? Yeah. God damn. I cannot believe that. Holy fuck.